Hej allihopa, detta är dags för fika och Kladdkaka. Okay, that's not my Swedish chef impersonation, but who just called me Muppet? But it is the introduction to today's larder living recipe. So, come along, it's time for fika and some sticky sweet chocolate cake. By the way, Fica means coffee break, and it's a complete social institution in Sweden. For Swedes, Fica is an appointed time of day where friends and colleagues gather together mid-morning or mid-afternoon and enjoy coffee or tea along with a pastry. Everybody does Fica, and they've been doing it for over 100 years. What's not to like? And maybe Fica might be something you'd like to try, or even make it one of your own new good habits. And speaking of which, 6 months ago, the idea of having few distractions and being surrounded by food might have seemed like a vacation. But after 2 months of lockdown, we know that this can be a slippery slope, leading to grazing all day and overeating. Not good. So here's the thing. If you're struggling with overeating and you're not doing this already, make sure you are sticking to set meal times. This can send a clear signal to your brain and reinforce an innate sense of when it's time to eat and when it's not. And this is where Fica, or something equivalent like a coffee break or Elevenses, can support you by adding a regular time in the day to enjoy the food that you really love. This is how it can work. Think about a food or treat that really gives you pleasure. Whatever works for you. It could be a crisp, tangy, sweet apple, a square or two of chocolate, a handful of nuts, whatever, so long as it's something you really enjoy. Next, decide what portion size is sensible and right for you for this treat. And importantly, the time of day that it's going to do you the most good. This can include a moment when you're often stressed or when you just need a regular pick-me-up. Then stick with it, especially the portion size. That's important. And practice this until the habit sets in. It's essential to practice a little flexibility too, when you need it. So for instance, if something unexpected happens in the day, have your slice of cake or square of chocolate after breakfast, if that's when you need it most. Just remember, if you change your treat time for a given day, don't double dip, and stick to your chosen sensible portion size for the day. When it comes to choosing your healthy eating habits, we're all different. So it pays to experiment and find the kind of structure that works for you. And remember, habits need to be broken from time to time. And it's possible to be a little flexible and eat well. My advice is to experiment and trust yourself to learn what works for you. So I wish you good health, lots of chocolate cake, and happy eating. Chocolate Kladdkaka. Kladdkaka is Swedish for sticky cake, and this is the perfect larder recipe. It's really easy to make, it's quick, it's inexpensive, and super delish. Something else about this recipe that's interesting is that it freezes really well. So if you want to make this part of your daily fika routine or coffee break routine, you can bake the cake, and when it cools off a bit, slice it in. Wrap the slices individually in cling film and bung them in the freezer if you have access to a freezer. Then when you're ready to eat them in the morning, for instance, you can pull the individual slice out of the freezer, put it into the refrigerator, and let it defrost. And during the course of the day, you know that you've got a nice bit of reward coming your way. Right, so ingredients, really basic, simple ingredients for this recipe. So we've got sugar, we've got some cocoa powder, we've got some plain flour, and some vanilla, 1 banana mashed, and 100 grams of dark chocolate. And the recipe uses milk to moisten the ingredients, and almond milk was on sale at the supermarket today, so I got that for £1.20 for a liter. And milk and soy milk, which you could also use, runs just under £1. So I splurged a little bit on the almond milk because I think it'll give it a great flavor. Oh, yep. Chocolate, a little bit about the price of chocolate. Shop around is the message because the prices vary incredibly, actually. Sometimes the really nice eating chocolate like Lindt goes on sale, and then it can be around £1.50 or whatever, which is not too bad. For this recipe, I'm using Tesco Classic Dark Chocolate. We need 100 grams, so the size is just perfect. And this works out to be, I think it's about £1 for the bar. And I found the cheapest was at Sainsbury's, and it is their Belgian baking chocolate, and that comes in at 72p for 100 grams. So shop around, find the best bargain for your chocolate. Something interesting about this recipe is that it's definitely vegetarian and it's practically vegan. The only sort of gray area there is the chocolate that you have. So some chocolate contains, even dark chocolate, some milk products or traces of milk products. So if you are vegan, look at the ingredients on the chocolate that you buy, and if you want to be 100% sure, buy vegan chocolate. It's out there. It tends to be a little more expensive, but it's there. Another thing about this recipe is it uses olive oil. How interesting. So it's an olive oil dark chocolate cake, and I really think you'll like it. This is an all-in-one method for making a cake, and that simply means that basically everything gets combined together. You start with the dry ingredients and mix them well. Combine the wet ingredients, and then for this recipe we're going to melt the chocolate and the olive oil together, and then mix them all in one. It's as simple as that. Right, the first step for this recipe is to heat the olive oil up just until it's warm. Take it off of the heat and then add the chocolate and let that get melting. Then we can move on to combining or mixing the dry ingredients. This takes 160 mils of olive oil. That's going to go into the saucepan and onto a low heat just to warm it up a bit. While the olive oil is warming up, it's a good time to mix the wet ingredients and then the dry ingredients. So for the wet, let's start with the almond milk. And we want 175 mils of the almond milk. Two teaspoons of the vanilla extract. It's a little shy on this one since I overdid it on the first. Good. And a mashed banana. The recipe calls for 3 tablespoons, which equals just about 1 banana. So we'll do that now. Potato masher will do. And that's pretty well mashed into the pot. And that's the wet ingredients. Next, let's mix the dry ingredients. Right, so that's 200 grams of flour, which is just under 2 cups. 200 grams of castor sugar, which comes out to be about 1 cup. and 60 grams of cocoa powder, which is 1/2 cup. And finally, it's 3/4 a teaspoon of salt. And to mix these together, just use a fork. And just until well combined. Okay, so I've just added the chocolate that was 100-gram bar, broken up into bits into the warm olive oil for that to melt. And you just want to keep an eye on this, and if the olive oil is too cool and it's not melting, you can gently heat up the saucepan and then turn the heat off, and so it will continue to melt. And it's really important not to let the oil get hot, else it will do a number on the chocolate. And now just stirring the oil and the chocolate together, and it's doing its melting thing, but it needs just another couple of minutes on the warm hob. Okay, while the chocolate is melting into the warm olive oil, it's a good time to line our tin with some parchment paper. So we're using a baking tin that's about 20 to 20 centimeters in diameter. And what you want to do is to cut out a piece of parchment paper that's exactly the size of the bottom of the tin. You can use a pencil to draw the tin directly onto the disc so that you have a reference. And then a long strip of paper that's going to form the collar around the inside of the tin. That should stick out about 2 inches above the tin itself. Now, what you want to do is along the bottom edge, you can see that I've cut tabs about a quarter, half-inch in all along the bottom. And that's going to help the piece of paper take a circular form and fit in together with the disc. You'll see in a second. Okay, so I've lightly greased this tin with a little bit of olive oil, and this will help the paper stay in place. So the collar goes in first. You can tape the end if you like, and then fit in the disc. And you can see that all fits together pretty well. It doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to make sure that the batter of the cake doesn't come in contact with the metal part of the tin so it won't stick when it bakes. Good, done. Okay, now is the all-in-one part. It's the easy part. Everything comes together. We're going to stir together the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients, basically. So grab a wooden spoon. Remember the dried ingredients here. And we're going to add the almond milk, the mashed banana, and the vanilla extract. And now the chocolate's completely melted in the warm olive oil. So we're just going to bung that all together. The smell, so nice. Chocolate and olive oil. Who'd have thunk? Really lovely. And then stir everything together. And that's your batter. Okay, and the last step is to scrape it into the lined tin. I think I'll use the rubber spatula for that. And in it goes. And then if it needs it, you can smooth the top so that it's even. And this looks fine. It's ready to go into the oven. So that baked in a 200-degree oven for about 25 minutes. And let's take a slice. Looks great. And to serve, you can have it as is or with a little bit of powdered sugar. Et voilà, bon appétit.